Up next is Dr. Wendy Anderson from Stetson University. She is the professor and chair of the Environmental Science Studies. And I just do want to mention, this is a beautiful arrangement made for us by the DeLand Flower Club. And I'm just going to set it down onto the floor so everyone can see the screen. But I just want to thank them very much for that.
Thank you, Nancy. And it's really fun to actually be sharing the stage this morning with some of the best leaders in environmental and water-related leadership in the county. So I appreciate the question from the center of the room a few minutes ago about HOAs, because this is exactly what I'm going to talk about. And I live in one of the large HOAs also, and I didn't mean to, but it was an accident. But anyway, that's a different story. And anyway, it's all about making your kids happy. So anyway, to redeem myself from making that decision, I decided seriously. I decided to run for the board, and I've never run for any sort of elected office ever, and I won. And so I'm on the HOA board now for Victoria Park Community. And I did that for the purpose of seeing if I could actually make some changes from the inside out and get this community that has, at its very core and its original development plan, some deep environmental values, and see if we can't get that neighborhood back on track. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about some projects that we have unfolding there, and some initial data that have just come in from some baseline studies we've done, and hopefully it will inspire you if you live in an HOA to get your HOA on track too. So let's see if we can actually get the advance to work here. Okay, so I don't think I have to tell this audience all the environmental problems in Florida, but to just highlight a few that directly relate to our ongoing transformation of land into these kinds of suburban residential developments. Obviously, these things are impacting our groundwater and surface water conservation. They are contributing to our nutrient pollution in ground and surface water, and obviously at the coast. As I always say to my students, water flows downhill, even in Florida. So, and of course, urban sprawl and loss of ecosystems and all the biodiversity associated with that. And of course, it actually helps facilitate the spread of invasive species. So you've got a lot of problems to solve here, but of course we're focusing on water today. And so of course residential developments, as our friend in the middle of the room here has already pointed out, they're a big part of the problem. We have lots of sources of the problems of nutrients in our water in the state, but these residential developments are a big piece of it. And of course it's because we have large percentages of our area that are in turf grass. We have high irrigation demands, high fertilizer and pesticide use. Usually this leads to lots of runoff, even if it's into stormwater retention ponds, retaining that on site, that can still become a source of nutrients into our groundwater supply, which of course makes its way to our springs. So I don't want to say best practices because it's an HOA, but can we go for better practices? So the Victoria Park community, if you live in DeLand, you're surely familiar with it. It's one of the largest residential developments in West Volusia, and it's about 2,000 acres. It was the development plan was approved around 1999. They really started building in full force around 2003. It's about 2,000 acres. Right now we have a little over 2,500 homes. We're building out to 3,500. It's large. It's a large community. And of course, it's a great place to live. We've got golf courses and tennis and I got all the stuff. And it's very cute. If you haven't been over there, you should take a look. It's like Pleasantville. And actually not, but okay. So, but what's also really cool is that part of the development orders from the very beginning were to actually keep nearly 400 acres of original longleaf pine forest intact as conservation areas. We have hiking trails through there. It's really beautiful. And even throughout the neighborhood, we have several areas where we've maintained the original wetlands and the native vegetation around those wetlands. That's in addition to our 38 retention ponds and other areas where we manage water. The Victoria Park community is also a large chunk of land in the Blue Springs spring shad. So we understand that all of our groundwater percolation and recharge is impacting water quality at Blue Spring and obviously ultimately down to the river. So so when we think about these projects we're doing in the neighborhood, we're framing this in the context of the spring system. So, so I just want to give you a couple other kind of quick things about how we do water in Victoria Park. So first of all, again, kind of part of the original development orders is that all irrigation water will be reclaimed water from the city. We were one of the early customers from the City of DeLand utility to actually receive reclaimed water for irrigation. We have 5 ponds in our neighborhood that actually store reclaimed water. The city pumps it up to us, and then we distribute it out to our lawns. That's in addition to other stormwater collection ponds, which are not holding reclaimed water. So we only irrigate with reclaimed water. We do that on a schedule of 2 times a week, although we also have maintenance days where people just basically go ahead and irrigate anyway because they're like, oh, it's free water, I should just irrigate, like even though your lawn doesn't need it, but whatever. Okay, so, and we don't have individual irrigation meters because basically the cost of our irrigation water is just baked into our HOA dues to the tune of about $200 per household per year. As a neighborhood, that means we're spending about $500,000 a year in our HOA budget paying for our reclaimed water. So it isn't free. Even though it doesn't feel like you have to, like you have to pay for it because it isn't in a monthly bill. So, so we often have problems with our reclaimed water because it's full of nutrients, and the reclaimed water ponds end up getting really gunky. They're full of nutrients. They turn to algae in the summer. The bottom right photo, I don't know if you can see it with the glare, is actually showing like a huge cyanobacterial bloom in our ponds in the summertime. It's, it's not nice. And then it ends up clogging our valves for our irrigation lines. And so anyway, that's one problem. And then another big problem is that we have irrigation heads all over the neighborhood that are poorly adjusted, and they're just spewing this water straight out into the street on the sidewalks, and it's running into our storm drains. So, so there's that. In our common areas, and in some parts of the neighborhood, even the residential lawns are maintained by a contract with Brightview Landscape Maintenance. And as you mentioned, they're also mowing all the way down to the water's edge and, kind of spewing grass clippings into the ponds. There are a lot of problems with it, but by and large, they do an okay job most of the time. And then in terms of our our turf grass, most of our lawns are dominated by St. Augustine, and again, that seems to be, we're very discouraged from having anything but St. Augustine as our grass. We can sort of expand our beds into, other kinds of plantings. And so going back to the original development orders, there's a statement in there, there's pages and pages that talk about kind of environmental goals for this neighborhood. But one of the statements that I just keep pulling out, sort of throwing at the rest of the board and everybody, is that 75% of all landscaped areas should be maintained in drought-tolerant, xeriscaping, or native plants. So, we've got the orders right here, so let's do it. So one of the solutions we're working with is to try to see if we can actually expand the use of Florida-friendly plants, Florida-friendly landscaping, or native plants, pollinator-friendly plants, like all the different things that we can work towards to actually replace turf grass with other kinds of shrubs and plantings that don't require as much water and nutrients. And in fact, the neighborhood already does this in their common areas, but we still have a heavy use of fertilizers and pesticides. So, so right now, Stetson is in a partnership with the county, including Megan, who's a part of our team, who you just heard from, and the University of Florida Center for Landscape and Urban Ecology. And we have a variety of projects that we're doing in Victoria Park to really use this community as a model for how we might be able to help an existing community shift culturally and in their landscape practices to have a landscape that actually promotes biodiversity and reduces water use and reduces nutrients. So this is kind of a laundry list of projects we're doing. It's everything from natural science projects looking at actual flow of water and hydrology and plant uptake and soil science, but it's also policy analysis and looking at how development orders align with state laws, align with HOA covenants, align with landscape management contracts, etc. And then it's also looking at educational outreach and communication strategies to just get individuals in the neighborhood to learn, to know, to make different choices, to save money. And so those are kind of the scope of projects that we're doing. A baseline study that we started this summer was to actually just go out and collect soils around 12 of the retention ponds in just one section of the neighborhood, Victoria Trails on the northwest quadrant, and look at what the soils are doing, and then also look at the nutrients in the ponds that those soils are draining into. So we defined basically the watershed for each pond, the drainage basin for each pond, and we collected soils we collected soils close to the ponds, and then we collected soils kind of up in the lawns above the ponds, and found some really kind of interesting initial results. So, so I have 3 more slides, Shelley, and I'm gonna stop for questions. Okay, so this is really quick, and I don't expect you to like digest this because we have to race through now. But as a kind of in every single nutrient that we measured, they are higher in the rights of way, which are basically that strip between the sidewalks and the street. So it's where residents are actually landscaping. We compared rights of way down to the pond edges, and of course the nutrients are higher where people are adding fertilizers. But that's also where we're irrigating. So we're putting lots and lots of this reclaimed water, which is really, really nutrient rich, and we're fertilizing. And so down in the common areas, we're not adding any fertilizer. We're actually following the fertilizer ordinance, Megan. So I checked. I literally walk around and I checked. So anyway, what we have found too is that that if you kind of look from pond to pond as our sample size, that the ponds with the highest nutrient loads in them are actually associated with the lawns that have the highest nutrient loads in them. And so, okay, yeah, the nutrients in the ponds are definitely coming from the lawns, and that's also important to note. And I'm going to kind of skip over some of those other details. But the other thing that we found here is that the pond that stores the reclaimed water is like 3 to 4 orders of magnitude higher in its nutrient loads than their stormwater ponds, because it's coming straight from the sewage treatment plant. So, you would expect it to have nutrients. But I think the upshot here, and maybe the take-home message that I would leave you with, is that if you are in a neighborhood that is being irrigated with reclaimed water, you don't need to be fertilizing at all. There's so much nutrients in the reclaimed water that if we're expecting the neighborhoods to actually help us distribute all that water and nutrients so we don't have to send it straight to the river as a point source of nutrients, and we want to distribute it out on the landscape, we better not be overloading the landscape so it can't take up the plant. It can't take up the nutrients that we're giving it. So that's one take-home message from today. Also, we're going to be working with our landscape company to keep them from mowing right down to the pond edge. We're having a big meeting with them tomorrow morning, and it's another big improvement we can make. And we have a whole series of educational workshops that are going to be rolled out over the next year in the neighborhood. So it's going to, hopefully we'll begin to see some changes happening, and most importantly, culture change. So a few other just sort of ongoing musings that I hope we can, as a symposium throughout the day, talk some more about, is it possible in these neighborhoods to actually start moving towards, more edible plantings, have some, as Chris Codman said earlier, some community gardens, some agri-hoods, whatever. So anyway, lots and lots of fun things to explore with using these HOA neighborhoods as a unit for change. So I will stop with that, actually just leave you with some acknowledgments in the background.